Thank you for joining us for the virtual 2025-2026 LPS Budget Forum. We are going to start with a brief presentation by Associate Superintendent for Business Affairs, Dr. Liz Standish, and she's going to highlight the preliminary proposed budget. During the presentation, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can enter them into the Q&A. We are going to answer your questions after the presentation during this live forum. All of your comments and feedback, along with the questions, are going to be gathered and shared with the board and staff. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Standish.
Good afternoon. We are excited to share the budget with our local community and get feedback. We do have a member of our finance committee, Mr. Piyush Shrivastava, is listening in as well, so he can take the information from the community straight back to the work of the finance committee in that role. And I have an abbreviated presentation because this forum is intended truly to have the conversation with the community and find out what Q&A is important and on your minds, and then we will dive in. So just to give you an idea of our opportunity for community input, we're here now in a first of a series of budget forums. So we have one also this evening and tomorrow evening, if you know someone who's interested and would like to participate. We have an online input tool on the district website where people can submit Q&A, and we actually provide that rolling Q&A as feedback back to the community. And we're going to close that input window formally on the website on July 11th so that the finance committee can come back together, review the input from the community, and be prepared for the second work session scheduled for July 22nd. That doesn't mean that we're not open to have conversations or offer presentations or continue to give information to the community throughout the budget process. We go into August, get school year started, and we have the budget hearing there the end of August. And we now at this point have moved into what is more the statutorily defined process of the budget. Most of the decisions have to have been made by this point because the school year is already underway. And then in September, we have our property tax request hearing. And the property tax request hearing can happen in two formats. One format is it happens locally at a school board meeting on September 9th. The other format is it happens with other taxing entities in Lancaster County in the countywide joint public hearing. And that would happen typically at the city county building based on what the county decides to do. Right now, our preliminary proposed budget is within the growth threshold that we can allow to just have the hearing locally. So that's 2% plus growth for the property tax request. So right now we are planning on having the property tax request hearing locally at the school board level. We will not know until the end of August when we receive our final valuation if things change and if we are participating in the countywide hearing. And then we have a board meeting, the second board meeting in September, where we adopt the budget. And the budget is actually due to be filed September 30th, which is why we're happy you're with us today, because earlier in the process, June is when we truly need to have that information. So there's the two different processes that can happen in September. And throughout our budget process, we have 2 public work sessions, 3 public forums, 6 board meetings that offer opportunities for public input, and then an online tool where people can maybe watch a video and then they have a question. And on their own time, on their own schedule, they could submit a question and get an answer through the website. And we have 2 formal statutorily required public hearings. Information about the budget calendar is available on the district website. You just type in the word budget to the keyword search, and that will get you access to videos, presentations, the online Q&A and input tool, and all of the dates related to the budget. We continue as a school district to navigate and work really hard to create structures of stability, even though we're in an environment that has a lot of volatility. And volatility to us, what that means is we have variables that are swinging pretty wildly from year to year that we're trying to stabilize with long-range planning so that we can make good decisions that are sustainable to support students across the city and our schools. When you look at our general fund budget, sometimes people are curious how decisions get made and how the general fund budget is assembled. We compile district needs. That input comes from directors and all levels of the organization to set priorities, and we align those to the strategic plan, and we'll do an overview of the line item detail in this forum. There's a much more detailed line by line presentation from the work session with the board last night. The most significant increase in the district budget is the salary and benefits and what's negotiated and approved by the Board of Education. Staffing conferences occur with every school with our human resource and instruction department, looking at the staffing profile, class sizes, grade level by grade level, school by school. And then departments submit requests that come up through the budget office, and we work through that prioritization and alignment. We try to make sure that the individuals that are leading closest to the budget and where it's impacting get that opportunity to weigh in on priorities for the board consideration. Our school district is growing. Lincoln has historically been a growing school district. We did have a bit of a downturn from the pandemic. That was predominantly from a small kindergarten class. Some families made a decision to wait a year. And then coming out of the pandemic, we had a little bit flatter enrollment for a little bit, but we've had the most recent growth in the last couple years. This is mostly due to live birth rate decline. This is a national trend, not just a Lancaster County or Lincoln trend, that there was a peak in the birth rate around 2012, and it has continued to decline over the last 10 years. So that impacts the enrollment in schools. And we look at our cohort enrollment, so you can see the count of students in each grade level. Something that's interesting to note is we tend to grow by about 150 students between 8th grade and 9th grade. In the Lincoln community, we just have a number of families that make a decision to come join us for maybe a Class A school experience or even one of the new schools. So we would expect that 3,200 mark as far as grade levels per class in high school to hold up over time, based on our classes ranging right around that 3,000 mark. And so our enrollment has been bolstered at many grade levels. Last year, our enrollment for K-12, because this is the graph that we're looking at, was about an increase of 575 students. If you put pre-K into the mix, it was over 600 students. We are forecasting continued enrollment growth. What we use for forecasting in Lincoln Public Schools is the cohort. So it's the students that we know about that are in our system, and we roll them forward to the next grade level. What we don't have in our forecast for enrollment are new families moving in. So this number will be bolstered by new families moving in if we see the trend from last year continue. We just need time to see and tell what's going to happen with enrollment as we start the school year and move towards the official count, which occurs in November. You will notice on this graph, we also have early childhood held flat at approximately 1,936 students. We are planning to open 2 additional early childhood classrooms, which will mean 4 sections if we have staff available to do that. So that could bolster the early childhood enrollment even up to 100 more students. So we hope to see new growth moving in and an increased ability to serve early childhood, increasing our growth expectation, but we definitely forecast just based on what we know today. We align all of our expenditures within the components of the strategic plan. And in the budget work session for the Board of Education last night, we broke out each element of the strategic plan with line item detail, FTE counts, and dollar amounts. So that information is available for the community, but due to the length of walking through all those line item details, we do a little bit of an abbreviated format for the forum just so we can focus more on community input. So we have investments in supporting like our graduation pathways program, some of our components and student supports around graduation, and our goal towards graduation, along with about $1 million investment in early childhood, opening new classrooms. Staffing related to student supports is about $4 million. We have investments in salary and benefits. I will share with you the overall salary and benefits number is more like 18.5 million. That is a typical number for a salary and benefit increase in an organization our size. However, this year that number is decreased because we had a legislative bill pass that decreased the retirement contribution required by the employer for employees. So that was about a $6 million decrease. So that's why that net of 12 million, if someone's been tuning into these presentations over the years, that number might seem a little bit lower, and that is due to a legislatively required change. And that's something we're keeping an eye on for the future. We also have some investments in community engagement, and contracting potentially with additional federal presence as we look at some of the federal changes. I'll talk about that on a later slide. And we have fixed costs such as insurance premiums, and I don't mean health insurance premiums, but property insurance premiums, utilities, parts for buses, supplies for custodial staff. And this budget does propose $2 million for maintenance, like a one-time maintenance project at various schools. So that can be parking lot resurfacing, roof repair, replacement, resurfacing gym floors at a large high school. So some of those items are accounted for in this budget. We had a bond issue in 2020, and the majority of the bond issues projects are coming to a close. And so we're really looking at some opportunities to continue to keep up on our routine maintenance needs in our school. So that's about 20 million of like one-time type of projects that we can take on here in this budget. 2 million, not 20 million. Every year we have proposed requests of needs that we cannot fund. There's always more that we want to do that we're not able to afford to do. So we have about 3.6 million that was requested that we were not able to fund in the budget. And so priorities and choices had to be made based on input from staff, input from the board members, and we work through that process. We also look for opportunities for cost savings. One that's pretty widely known through the community is our investment in geothermal heating and cooling. For example, when we replaced Park with geothermal, we decreased our energy costs by 54%. We've recently installed solar at Northwest and Standing Bear, and energy comes with demand charges during peaks, and we're saving about $485 per month at each of those sites. And then we also do a lot of waste diversion from the landfill, knowing that it costs money to take waste there. And so we recycle, reuse, and compost. So here's just a few examples of some of the things we pursue to save money. Our general fund budget of expenditures is going up about 3.63% overall, from 539 million to about 559 million, about a $20 million increase. And you can see the budget graphically in a 5-year trend, going back to 21-22. And this graph compares the LPS budget increase with inflation, and then also a variable that we feel is much more representative of what we do, which is we employ people and educate children across the city, but that's done by people in our organization. So the employment cost index is a variable from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it is a national variable that's an economic indicator that's tabulated. And so we believe the majority of our cost, as you'll see, about 90% of our budget is staff. So the cost to employ people is much more representative of what a budget increase can be expected in Lincoln Public Schools. The number becomes available in September, so I'll fill in that September number when it's available. You can see this graphically where you see the blue line of inflation and then the change in the expenditure budget for Lincoln Public Schools and the employment cost index. When we think about the revenue budget, so that's the highlight at a very high level of the proposed expenditure budget changes on the general fund side. The revenue continues to also experience volatility with changing variables, and we navigate those with a 3-year forecast. We're looking 3 years at a time. We're stabilizing with cash flow. Cash flow is great. We could use it for a one-time expense, or we could use it incrementally. We would never want to have a budget that had a large chunk of cash flow, because then the following year we would have to find a new solution for revenue. So we wouldn't want to create instability with that. One variable that we're monitoring very closely that we know is high interest in the community is our available federal funds. So federal grants that have been awarded to Lincoln Public Schools. This is a graphic that our communications and federal programs team put together which kind of talks a little bit about the school district, some variables of our student profile, but then details out the various grants the school district receives. Some of these are multi-year grants. So for example, there's approximately $100 million in grants represented in the Lincoln Public Schools. We recently received a letter on April 29th that the school-based mental health grant would be discontinued on December 31st of 2025. That supported 19 FTE, 18 counselors, which are in our elementary school. The Board of Education has had a commitment to funding counselors in every school and has been working away at that over the series of a number of years now. So in order to sustain the people in that program and serve every child in Lincoln in a school with a counselor, we have put about half of the funding necessary to continue that grant so that after December 31st, the second half of the year would be paid for with the general fund if we are not successful in restoring that funding. So Lincoln Public Schools has contacted our delegation in DC, and we are looking to restore the funding and appeal the decision of discontinuing the grant. If the grant is discontinued, we have the funds available based on this budget proposal to sustain it for the full next fiscal year. And then we would put the second half, which would be currently funded by federal funding, into the budget plan for prioritization and discussion for the following year. We also have to closely watch any changes in the state with state equalization aid. We are a school district that receives equalization aid, which means our student needs minus our local resources, our needs exceed resources, so we receive equalization aid. And as house values have grown in Lincoln and our property values have increased substantially over the last 5 years, our state funding has dropped. So you can see we've dropped from 2018-19 kind of at a peak of 146, 147 million down to last year, which was 72 million, about half of that. This year, because of our student enrollment needs, and last year was a lower valuation growth year, we are seeing an increase in state funding of approximately $10 million. It is important looking forward to understand that as property values go up, state equalization aid does go down. So this year we are projecting an estimate of about a 7% increase in the total real property for the proposed budget. We'll get that final number around August 20th, and we'll be able to finalize our budget plan at that point. You can see the variability that we're trying to navigate and smooth out with valuation growth. So for example, in 23-24, valuation growth of 22.5% resulted in the following year a drop of $32 million in state aid. Then we had a smaller valuation growth of 3.85. That's resulting in an increase in state funding of $10 million. And so then we'll have to see how the math comes together after this 25-26 year, whether that valuation growth results in an increase or decrease in state aid, and plan accordingly for the future. We are currently planning, and this is an estimate only, although the levies will be finalized after we receive our certified valuation. We are currently planning to lower the levy. The Board of Education's goal is lowering the levy about 7 cents. That is based on general fund coming down about 7 cents. And then we have our qualified capital purpose fund and our building fund or bond fund coming down. We are proposing to place a penny in the building fund. Once again, thinking about the facility needs as a growing school district as we look towards the future. So the building fund investment would generate, 1 penny would generate about $3.8 million. The last time we invested in the building fund was 2019-2020. And the unobligated balance in the building fund right now is about $7.8 million. This is what we would use for acquiring property, growth, if we determine there's a school that needs an addition, or if we're investing in student growth or various things across the city. We own about 8 million square feet of property. One thing that has recently changed is the way the property levy is managed, and then the various caps that are on it and how we're utilizing cash flow from year to year. So you can see for a number of years, the levy would stay very consistent. And then in 2023, we had two big things happen. One, there was a legislative change. There was a large increase in state funding for special education. And so Lincoln Public Schools made the decision to lower the levy. And then number three, we had the 22.5% increase in valuation. So you can see that we lowered the levy in 23-24. We lost the $32 million in state aid. So we needed to raise the levy back up modestly to accommodate for that. And then this year, the way the numbers are coming together, we are able to lower the levy down to about $1.04. So that will be a definitely historic low levy when you look back at the history of the school district. This graph details the percentage that the district is funded from property taxes and state aid. One thing we will need to do after the close of this fiscal year is we will have to reflect back on how much of the property tax portion of this graph was paid for with state funds through state credits. So the work of the special session last fall front loaded the state credits. So property tax bills actually did go down from that work. And so we will need to slice out and have that be state funded in the future. So this doesn't accurately represent actual dollars being paid in property taxes. When you look at the changes that were made last fall, we just need a year to get that data set and kind of come up with what are those percentages that we're receiving from the other property tax credit source. The Board of Education always thinks about what is the impact on the average homeowner. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts here, and we want to make sure that we're putting all of them in a way and understand all the pieces coming together and how that impacts the average homeowner. So we had in 23, we had the big increase in the average home value up to $281,000. We did lower the LPS levy to $1.07. And at the bottom, this is the annual. So over the course of a whole year, taxes went up about $246 or about 9% for that average homeowner. Then when we go to 24, the home value went up from 281 to 290. We did have to raise the levy because we lost $32 million in state aid. And so we raised the levy and LPS taxes would have gone up about $216. This year, we're estimating values are going to go up 7%. This will change for every homeowner. Someone might have a home that's going up 15% and someone might have a home that's going up 5%. But with the proposed lowering of the levy to $1.04, based on this scenario, taxes would go up about $8 per year. So it's a fairly flat from this scenario request of property taxpayers. This graph shows you our revenue by trend, state aid, property taxes, and other. And like I said, we will need to reflect back on the 24-25 year once we know what the percentage is that comes from state sources of the property tax. I think this graph most clearly describes what we navigate in Lincoln Public Schools when I talk about the volatility, the swings, and how we try to create a plan of stability in a world where things are not incremental or stable, and we're trying to work through that. So we might have in any given year a 7% increase one year, and then the next year we're at 2, and then the next year we're at 8, and the next year at 1. And we're constantly trying to bridge all of that together and smooth it out over multiple years. This year does represent a little bit more of an incremental increase at 4% for the revenue looking at the 25-26 school year. So when you look at our general fund source of funds, predominantly property taxes, state aid, and then special education has become a more significant portion these last few years. We are looking to use a very small amount of cash flow to fund this budget, meaning right now we are expecting for expenditures to exceed revenue by about $1.3 million. And in the state of Nebraska, you can see how we stack up compared to the state averages. And this is where we also need to look at how we describe our revenue streams. This is a one-pager that's available on our website that walks through kind of the transactional, how we build the budget. And we are 211th out of 244 school districts in per pupil spending, and we spend about $16,052 per pupil compared to the state average of $17,205. And we have opportunities right now. We're at the noon virtual public forum. We have one in person tonight, and then we have another virtual forum tomorrow night. And I have an amazing team of people who work with me here at Lincoln Public Schools, putting all the pieces and parts together. And we work really hard to make sure that we're trying to get all of this put together for the board consideration. I would also like to compliment the Board of Education and our new board members. Really just a month in office, our board kind of coming together, attending series of meetings, having conversations, giving input, and making sure they truly understand the budget and the budget picture. So we greatly appreciate the hard work of the Board of Education in getting this pulled together to present to the community. And with that, Mindy, I would be open to any questions or comments or discussion from the people involved in the forum today.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Standish. I am not seeing any questions or comments coming in, and so I think we are just about at 12:30. I think with that, we'll close this virtual forum. And if you think of any other questions, you're welcome to go to lps.org/budget. We've got a Q&A document there. You can also email Dr. Standish. We've got that information as well. So with that, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.